finally we are here.
Here, Shri Bhagavan, okay. We already did that yesterday.
Yeah.
So start from text
4.
4. Aparam bhavato janma param janma vivasvata kathami etad vijaniyam tamado proktavaniti.
Arjuna said, the sun god Vivasvan is senior by birth to you. How am I to understand that in the beginning you instructed this science to him?
Bahuni meva titani janmani tacharjuna tanyam veda sarvani natam vetta parantapa.
The personality of God had said, many, many births both you and I have passed, but I can remember all of them, but you cannot, O subduer of the enemy.
Ajopi sanavyatma bhutani mishwaropi san prakratim swamadhishtaya sambhavami atmamayaya.
Although I am unborn and my transcendental body never deteriorates, and although I am the Lord of all living entities, I still appear in every millennium in my original transcendental form.
So this is very important that sometimes people think that when God appears, he takes on the body of a human being because he looks like a human being. So they mistake him for an ordinary human being. But here Krishna is making this very clear that his transcendental body never deteriorates like our body. And his body, although looks like a material body, but it is fully transcendental. Every part of his body is complete spirit. And he appears by his Atma Maya, which means by his transcendental energy. We appear by the force of material energy, but Krishna appears in a very different way.
So this is this famous verse.
Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bharata abhyuthanam adharmasya tadatmanam shrijamyaham. So he describes the reason why he appears.
So whenever and wherever there is a decline in religious practice, O descendant of Bharata, and a predominant rise of irreligion, at that time I descend myself.
So the word there is actually dharma, and it's loosely translated as religious practice, but actually it's dharma, which is different from religion, as we have discussed before. So this is one of the reasons why Krishna appears when he sees that in a world or a universe. He goes to all the universes. So in a particular universe, when there is a decline in dharma, then he will appear to reestablish. Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha dushritam dharma sansthapanarthaya sambhavami yuge yuge.
To deliver the pious and to annihilate the miscreants, as well as to re-establish the principles of religion, I myself appear millennium after millennium.
So the real purpose Krishna appears in different avatars is to deliver the pious, which means to please his devotees. And the other things are incidental.
Because he doesn't really have to come to annihilate the miscreants. All it requires is a coronavirus, right?
Janma karma cha me divyam evam yo vetti tattvata taktya deham punar janma neti mameti so Arjuna. One who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities does not, upon leaving the body, take his birth again in this material world, but attains my eternal abode, O Arjuna. So first he describes that he appears in his transcendental body, then he describes the reason why he appears, and then he says this is the benefit of understanding Krishna's appearance and activities in truth. Vitaragabhaya krodha manmaya mamupashita bhavo jnana tapasa puta madbhavamagataha. Being freed from attachment, fear, and anger, being fully absorbed in me and taking refuge in me, many persons in the past became purified by knowledge of me, and thus they all attained transcendental love for me. So one may ask that what is the difficulty in learning about Krishna? Right? It's so easy. Krishna says there are 3 obstacles that prevent a living entity to take interest in Krishna or learn about him, which is attachment to material things, fear, and then anger, because of which people stay away from Krishna.
I think we should talk a little bit about the fear aspect.
Yeah.
So here in this purport, Prabhupada explains that what is the meaning of this fear. So in this material world, we are so burnt. So there is a little, what do you call it? A proverb, right? In India, in Hindi, where it says that when a cat gets burnt by milk, then by hot milk, then even if she is given like cooling buttermilk, then she will still run away from that buttermilk, because to her, anything that is white means that it is hot and it's going to burn her. So in the same way, because in this material world, forms and beauty and relationships have really traumatized us. So there is some trauma within us in respect to relationships. And so when we hear that how Krishna is also a person and that he also has activities and there are relationships, then that creates a fear within us. And that from that fear generates this anger, right? And when we have that, then we are not able to appreciate this personal nature of the absolute truth.
So we'll jump into our presentation now. And we're talking about avatar, why Krishna appears, different understanding of God. So we'll delve into that a little bit. And this is a question people have in general about, does God exist? And we are in this universe and on this planet, and we look at the stars and everything, and we wonder, where did we all come from? And is there somebody who's our source?
Yeah, it's, so far in the Bhagavad Gita, we've been discussing things that have sort of, we are able to find a bridge, right? Because we have our logic, we have our reasoning, and we can sort of walk on that. But in any spiritual path, you get to a point where one has to actually, fly on the wings of the heart, right? And logic is there to assist us, but it cannot really take us. And this is one of those places where we hear about how God is a person and, how he comes into this world.
Because we are talking about something that existed before us, right? And we have never seen where it came from. So no matter how much we can conjecture, we have to get it from the outside.
So let's watch this. This is a nice video about two babies in the womb, and they are trying to think about. You have to increase the volume.
Yeah, they're trying to think about,
no, the volume is
does the mother even exist?
Shed some light on the before life.
Hey, twin, I'm scared of birth. Why? It's the end of existence. We get ejected. We're finished. I'm also anxious, twin, but I'm not scared. Birth is supposed to be a transition to the real life. Huh. Don't give me the hiccups with your after-birth real-life fantasies. How can life be supported without an umbilical cord and amniotic fluid? Well, maybe it's a radically different form of life. Maybe we won't need the cord. I wish you were right. I keep kicking that thing away from my neck. Stop spinning for a minute and imagine, twin. After birth, we will enter a ginormous universe filled with light and with air that we will breathe through our mouths. Come on, grow some brain cells, will you? Mouths are not for breathing. Besides, if your postnatal paradise existed, why has no one ever returned from that realm? Forget it. Once we leave here, we collapse into cold, dry nothingness and wither into eternal gloom. I don't think Mother would allow that to happen. She nurtures us in this cozy womb. She sends us nutrients for months on end. For what purpose? Just to end it all with birth? No. Mother has greater plans for us than that. Now you're beginning to sound infantile. Do you see a mother lurking in some corner of the womb? Not a trace. Show me a mother. And as for your nutrients, can't you feel that annoying cord? Don't exchange empirical for fantastical.
Thankfully, these two delightful infants made it safely to the other side.
So this is our situation.
And Krishna actually describes that how everything is actually resting within him, right? So we are literally in the womb of Krishna.
Yeah.
And Lord Brahma prays like that in Srimad Bhagavatam. There's a prayer where Lord Brahma says that, I am situated within your womb. And just like a mother does not take any offense, even though, the baby kicks. So even though I may make some mistakes, so please excuse me, So,
So now the question is, this mother that these boys are talking about, how does this mother look, or how does our supreme source look? And for philosophers and people for centuries have tried to define it. Here we'll see how the top spiritual seekers, they define God. Oprah has taken interviews of these people, and then let's hear what they think who God is. Don't take this over. Look at the time.
you too.
What is your definition of God?
God is the highest place within each and every one of us. It's our divine self.
The source of you. That's what the source. That's
I
what
got
I
it.
experience.
I love
The
that.
source of you.
I define God as an energy, a spiritual energy. It has no denomination. It has no judgments. It has an energy that when we're connected to it, we know why we're here and what we're here to do. And to know that I'm one with something greater, an energy, a force greater than myself.
My definition of God. God is not only the Alpha, the Omega, but he's a friend. He's a confidant. He's a buddy. He is a lover of my soul. That's my definition of God.
An all-encompassing love that is the source of all, the reality of all, and the being through which I am.
Well, he is my beloved. He is my most intimate beloved, my friend, the one I look to in everything. I wouldn't try to define him because no one knows God but God. He is beyond even our idea of the beyond.
God is beyond all the forms of life, but also indwells every form of life as their essence. God is both beyond and within.
And we can go on. There's beautiful definitions.
The definition of God is
That goes on. You can, maybe we can share this, if you're interested.
the ever-present.
This is actually something that always seems to confuse people, or sometimes there's some bewilderment. That is God a light? Does God exist in every particle? Is God a person? Is God a male? Is God a female?
Is he love? Is he just
love?
Feelings, just emotions?
Is he love? Is he energy? Is he light? And there are all these different ideas that people have, and sometimes we get stuck on one idea and we try to box him in and say, this is it, right? And it cannot be anything else. He can only be an energy. There's an interesting Michio Kaku, he's also asked a similar question. It's like, do you believe in God? He says, of course I believe in God. He says, I believe in the God of the, because I see order. So I believe in that intelligence, and I believe in that energy that is that has, I'm paraphrasing, that has caused this order. But if you ask me, is he a person? No. So again, just we think it's one or the other, and we struggle. But the Vedic understanding is it includes within its fold. First of all, the word God is, again, it does not translate well. The word is Param Satyam, or absolute truth, right? And then it says that the absolute truth can be realized in these three phases. So all three are included within it.
Within that, yeah, and it's a comprehensive, multifold understanding of God, depending on how we want to perceive God. So in particle physics also, the observer affects the outcome of the observation. So here also, in this relationship with understanding this absolute, what the observer actually affects how they perceive God, how they perceive the absolute, because the absolute will reveal only that much according to the observer.
So in this, so it's sort of like, I don't know if any of you have actually stood on a railway platform early in the morning and seen a train come when it's still dark out. And so if somebody actually, so if the person saw that, and when you see a train from far, you see this big light, right? And so if that person sort of walks away at that time and somebody were to ask him, hey, so you saw a train, what does it look like? And he would say, well, it's just this big blob of light.
That gets bigger and bigger.
That gets bigger and bigger as it comes closer, right? So he wouldn't be off. He'd be completely right in saying that. And that is called in Sanskrit, Brahman.
So this Brahman realization or understanding of God means this glaring effulgence or light that is pervading the entire universe, and that's basically holding everything together in one sense. That's infinite oneness, infinite energy, light, or whatever we may call it, where everything merges into one.
And we can see that all over the world, many, many people. In fact, there have been studies of people who've had near-death experience, and they come back and they say they saw this big light. So, so now we can understand that when they're talking about this light, or even when the scientists we'll look at that, this consciousness that pervades everything, they're actually essentially talking about the Brahman.
And we'll talk more about what actually Brahman is, but you can think of it as this universal consciousness, this universal light or energy that's sustaining everything. And the next phase of understanding
I think
God.
there's a video there.
Oh yeah, this is so, and scientists are actually beginning to see, especially the scientists who are delving into particle and quantum physics and that realm, they are beginning to see this Brahman, this unifying principle that combines, that merges all the laws of nature that we are partially aware of. And it's something that Einstein really tried very hard to come to this unifying principle, because there are 5 forces of nature: electromagnetic, nuclear forces, gravitational forces, then the forces electromagnetic, gravitational, nuclear forces, and one more. So these forces, they were able to, they wanted to find a formula that would basically unite these forces. Somebody could write a formula that will express all these forces into one. But Einstein died not being able to find, especially they were not able to unite the force of gravity with other forces. So there's a desire to find this unity, and it's pointing more and more towards this Brahman aspect as scientists are looking. So this is he's a renowned physicist.
Dr. Hagelin is a world-renowned quantum physicist, educator, author, and president of the Global Union of Scientists for Peace. Dr. Hagelin has published over 100 the universe, the deepest laws of nature. Now, from modern science, looking back over the history of the last 50 years, has been an exploration of deeper levels of reality, deeper and deeper levels of reality, beginning with Newtonian physics or classical physics of the macroscopic, observable world, our environment. But then in the last century, delving into the world of the atom, which is governed by quantum mechanics, and then delving into the realm of the nucleus, which is governed by quantum field theory. And now the main thrust of physics today is delving into the unified field. As this chart shows, or superstring field in the language of physics, the most fundamental laws of nature that give rise to all the particles and forces that govern the universe, all of the atoms and molecules and macromolecules and physiologies and planets and galaxies. The whole universe, as you can see, emerges stage by stage in a very precisely understood mechanics from universal, pure intelligence, the unified field giving rise to the world of matter.
So this is kind of pointing towards this Brahman, because as we'll, when we get to the later chapters of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna will describe how he is pervading the entire universe, he's sustaining the entire universe through this Brahman effulgence, or the Brahman force. And that's what the scientists are getting towards. But until they accept this something beyond matter, it will be hard for them to really understand.
And actually, it is also described that by the process of logic and reason, this is the most.
This is the highest you can get.
This is the highest.
But then also you have to accept some leap that there is something beyond matter.
Yeah, but this is the, so Brahman is, like this whole cosmic consciousness, and one can, at least by understanding the difference between matter and spirit, one can have an appreciation for something that unites everything. And from which matter arises. So continue. So then
this is the second understanding, understanding of who the absolute truth is. And if the person just waited a little bit longer on the platform, then he will see that there's a train come on, and near the platform, he could see that there is an engine, there are carriages, and then there's a lot of things happening. He could see the machine running, the smoke coming out. Nowadays, they don't make those kind of trains, but the noise and everything. So you start seeing the localized form of the train. And this is the other understanding of the absolute truth, which is called Paramatma. And Paramatma is also understood as super soul, who is within everybody, within every atom, and he's the best friend within. It's just like sometimes we hear this voice from within, right? This inner conscience, that's the super soul. And Yeah.
So it's described that there are two birds in a tree. And so one bird, which is us, we are so busy eating the fruits, right, of that tree. And this other bird is the Paramatma. And it's just sitting there, patiently, lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, accompanying the living entity as it goes through its journey up and down, and just waiting that one day this tiny, this friend of mine is actually going to turn back towards me. And so he's just waiting. So that's Paramatma feature. And he accompanies us through this entire journey. And actually, Krishna describes that later, that it is from me that remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness comes. So in the next couple of slides, videos, we will see that, great personalities, this is the story of this mathematician, Ramanujan, and how, he and Mozart, all these personalities, when they are able to create something, they insist that whatever they have created was not, it did not happen in a logical sequence, but they received it.
It's like the inspiration that they receive is something beyond them. We call it inner voice or higher inspiration. We call it different things. But the super soul is what actually makes it happen. Just like when the soul leaves the body, then we cannot live. So avatar is more like an expansion of the Supreme, which appears for a certain period of time. But Paramatma is an expansion that stays with the soul during a journey throughout this, however long it may take.
And Paramatma is also in a sense an incarnation, right? Because he descends with the jiva.
Yeah.
And he accompanies. He's a special kind of
special avatar which stays with us. Our own
personal avatar.
Personal avatar in our heart. So this is the story of this great mathematician Ramanujan. And
it's really fascinating. If you guys haven't watched this movie, by the way,
The Man Who Knew Infinity.
It's a really, really nice, inspiring movie to watch. Actually, when you watch this movie, one of the things is when he goes to Cambridge, the professors, they keep telling him, like, you have to find the proof, how you got to this.
How you have to derive the formula.
And it was such a frustrating experience for him because he just knew the answers.
Yeah, they thought that maybe he stole it from somewhere. So anyway, so this kind of shows how, and this Namagiri is actually, as you can see in the picture, this is Lakshmi, who's the consort of Vishnu.
And then this is another really amazing, this is a movie. The name of the movie is Amadeus. And in this guy, he's his rival, he's Mozart's rival. And he talks about, because, when Mozart would write his music, it was always a first draft. And there were no lines that were erased or no corrections. And Mozart would say that it was like he would just receive it. Again, same. It was like a flash of inspiration and the whole composition would just come to him all at once. So,
and when his competitor, Salieri, he reads those music charts, he's totally blown over.
Yeah, he's very angry, actually.
So this is his competitor looking at the Mozart's charts.
These were first and only drafts of music. They show no corrections of any kind. Not one. Music already finished in his head. Page after page of it. As if he were just taking dictation. Finished as no music is ever finished. His place one note, and there would be diminishment. His place one phrase, and the structure would fall. It was clear to me. That sound I had heard in the Archbishop's studies had been no accident. Here again was the very voice of God. I was staring.
Oh, I think that was the problem. Focus right.
Krishna Prabhuji, you can't hear. There is no sound. No sound yet. Is there sound now? Yes, we can hear you now.
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Sorry for that. So this is another instance. Watson, he discovered the double helix structure in inspiration. He was struggling very hard, and then he had a flash of inspiration that showed him the structure. So
all of these different things, they show that there is a super soul within. And Krishna, like I said before, Krishna says that from me comes knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. So we can see that, by connecting with that super soul within, then we can actually go deeper into this, into this great source of creativity and inspiration. So this is Krishna as the super soul. And you can see the yogis, actually, they meditate on the super soul. So when we hear about the path of yoga, Ashtanga yoga, that is essentially meditation on the super soul within.
And the super soul has this Vishnu form, as you can see on the left, forearm Vishnu form, right next to the soul. He's sitting there, and he's in every single soul. So that's like when the sun is reflected in, there can be a million parts of water, and then the sun can be reflected in all the parts simultaneously. So similarly, the universal super soul is reflected as the individual super soul in each and every living entity and every single particle or atom.
Also, the middle slide shows, this is a verse that we are going to talk about in our next chapter, that how a person who's actually self-realized sees the divine spark in each and every living entity, whether it's an elephant or a dog or an animal or whatever it is. And so I was just thinking about this word namaste, which is so popular. And namaste literally means that I offer my respects to the divine within you. So that divine spark or that divinity within you is this super soul.
And the super soul basically runs the whole show. He runs the whole universe. He also runs the body. In our body, we don't really know how things are happening, how food is getting digested, how disease is being fought, and how everything is happening. It almost feels like everything is happening automatically, but it's actually happening by the potency of the super soul. So
it is also described that like deep sleep. Remember, we read this in the Vedanta Sutra. That was such a nice point, that when we have this deep sleep, then actually the soul goes and lies down on the bed of the super soul. It was such a beautiful idea. And I thought, wow, no wonder we like to have deep sleep.
When somebody has preference for understanding the absolute, just as energy or light or infinite consciousness, then the absolute truth is revealed to that person as this Brahman. But when somebody wants to know further, and then he sees that, there's a cause and effect and things are happening, there's intelligence, it must be somebody who's intelligent. So then the person inquires further, but they still want to kind of understand, or they're satisfied with understanding that, there is a person who runs this universe, and that's sufficient for them, or from whom I can get some powers or siddhis. And that to that person, the absolute truth is revealed as a super soul.
So there are different processes, and this we will talk about when we discuss the yoga ladder. We'll talk about different processes for realizing different aspects of that same absolute truth. Now we're talking about the same truth being realized in different aspects. And this is the understanding of Bhagavan, which is the personal. So if we go back to the example of the train, so the first one was, just seeing the light. The second one was he stayed long enough to realize that, oh, the train actually has a shape. It has engine, it has coaches. But then Bhagavan is when the train actually comes and stands. Now, for those of you who really need to understand this, I think a trip to India will really help understand. Because when a train comes to stop in India, you go inside. It's a whole universe. People are sitting and they're eating food. There are,
it's like a restaurant running inside. It's a playing field. The kids are playing, and everything.
It's a madhouse.
Happening inside a train. And so that's actually the understanding of Bhagavan, which means that the train actually comes to a standstill. You go inside and you realize that, oh, actually there are people and there are relationships and they're enjoying and there's variety and there is. So that is called the Bhagavan realization of that same absolute truth.
So understanding the absolute truth as a person, and it is explained that in the Bhagavad Gita that the two other realizations that Paramatma is a localized expansion of this Bhagavan, and the Brahman is just the effulgence coming out from the body of Bhagavan, so the blinding effulgence. So this survey shows how actually 70% of people in America, they believe that God is a person, and only 15% believe that he is not a person. So similar studies, more people believe God being a person than not.
Actually, our struggle with the idea of God being a person also depends on what we attribute to the personhood of God. So when we attribute judgment or anger or punishment, then we step back and we feel that maybe, God being a person is not such a good thing. And so even in our Vedic understanding, God as a person has many different levels of understanding. So one can relate to God as a person in a way that Vishnu can be this this very intimidating, official position where our relationship is one of formality and reverence. And then there is the understanding of God as a person, as Krishna, who is just this most lovable, adorable person who the young cowherd girls, they just fall madly in love with him because he's the most handsome and the most charming, person there. And he's, he plays the flute and he's cool and he does all kinds of things that completely attract the hearts of the gopis. And they fall
everybody falls in love with him.
Yeah, I was discussing earlier that how the immovable objects become movable and the movable objects become immovable, right? Which means that the rivers, which has a tendency to flow, become stunned when they hear the flute of Krishna, and the stones,
they start melting when they hear the flute or when they see Krishna out of love. So this personal understanding is explored quite a bit in Bhagavad Gita. Here we're just giving you a tiny bit of sample, but these three aspects can be compared in another example.
So sometimes, somebody might say, oh, I'm so thirsty and I want some water. And so we go to a person and say, can you please give me some water? And the person says, yes, there's water in the clouds. Go get it. So the person's going like, yeah, there is water in the cloud, but how do I get that? So hard. Then he goes to another person. He says, oh, I'm so thirsty. Can you give me some water? And he says, yes, there is water in the ground. Dig the ground and get the water. And again, that's difficult.
And that's like the meditation of the super soul.
So we'll come to that connection. And then the third one is where the person again goes back to, the third person is, I'm very thirsty. And he just puts the water in the palm of your hand, right? So now each one of these three responses correspond to the three phases of understanding the absolute.
So the water in the clouds represents, or trying to get water in the cloud represents trying to understand absolute truth as Brahman. Very, very arduous, Krishna describes later on in the 12th chapter. Very difficult process, requires complete control of the senses and the mind for long periods of time and blah, blah. And also the getting the water from the well represents connecting with the super soul or yogic realization. Also very, very difficult. Krishna rejects, Arjuna will reject this in the 6th chapter. He says, this is too hard for me. I just can't do it.
Because he's within the heart, right? Yeah. So one has to dig in.
Yeah. And this personal water in the hand means like connecting with Krishna directly. And that's the easiest. Krishna says, this is the easiest one. Anybody can actually do it. One doesn't have to be a yogi. One doesn't have to be a great scholar of the Upanishads and the Vedas. Even a child can actually access, have this personal relationship with God.
Susukham kartum avyayam, right?
So that's Krishna. We'll talk more about in the 9th chapter. So avatar, the word avatar means, literally in Sanskrit means somebody who descends, comes down, avatar. And Krishna has innumerable incarnations. Again, incarnation is not the exact translation of avatar, but he has innumerable avatars. And they appear in all the universes there are trillions and trillions of material universes. He appears in each one of them, and each universe there are again innumerable avatars. So
they're described to be like waves of an ocean, just like we cannot count the waves of an ocean. So in the same way, we cannot count how many avatars or incarnations appear in the world. And there are also different kinds of incarnations. So sometimes there can be a living entity who is infused with special potency, and that is a particular kind of avatar who's known as Shaktavesha avatar. So
like Jesus Christ or Buddha or Vasudev, they are considered like a living entity who has been empowered. Shaktavesha.
So that's an avatar. And then sometimes there is Krishna also appears in all the different species. So he comes in the species of the fishes and the tortoise and so on and so forth. So there are many incarnations given, and each one of them come with this desire. We'll talk about this. So why does he come? He doesn't have to. He says, I come because there is a dharma glani, which means that there's a decline of dharmic practices. He doesn't have to do that. He has enough energies that can actually execute that. So the real reason why he comes is because he wants to.
So in this you can see there's so many incarnations, and many of them you might have heard of. Lord Rama, Narsimha, Varaha, Narada. These are all different avatars of the Supreme Krishna.
And they're all mentioned. Actually, even it's interesting that Krishna is mentioned, all the 10 incarnations are mentioned, but even Buddha is mentioned. And then also Jesus is mentioned in Bhavishya Puran. Muhammad is mentioned in Bhavishya Puran also.
So the avatars are characterized by, their definition is given in the scriptures, and then nowadays there's the fashion that, oh, this is an avatar, but for an avatar to be avatar, they have to be mentioned in the scriptures, and they also have to perform inconceivable activities that is not possible for a regular human being to perform.
So this is a story of this very famous Mughal emperor Akbar, and he once so Birbal was his court court minister, and so Akbar, he was sort of challenging Birbal, and he said, oh, in your religion, like, why do you guys talk about God appearing as an incarnation? Like, why do you think he would want to come? This material world is not such a nice place, and why should he come? So then Birbal thought, okay, I need to respond to this. So one time, the emperor's son, the emperor was taking a stroll, and there was a lake there, and his son was actually playing around there. And suddenly, one of his men, he came running, and he said, "Oh my goodness, your Highness, your son has fallen in the pond." And so Akbar just ran inside that, and he just jumped inside that pond to save his son. But actually, his son had not fallen; it was just a rag doll. And so he came out, and he said, "What was that all about?" So then Birbal asked Akbar that you had so many attendants, so many soldiers, you have this great army. Any one of them would have happily jumped into the pond to rescue your son. But you, despite the fact that you had your royal robes on, you just jumped. You didn't even think about it. So in the same way, even though the Supreme Lord is actually all-powerful, but because of his great affection for the living entities who are struggling in this material world, he actually comes personally to reclaim them. So this is actually, one of the reasons why we are sort of in this world is because we have forgotten that we are a part of this supreme absolute truth, right? That we are also his energy. And so as a result, we are living in this world in complete state of forgetfulness. So sometimes when a person has dementia, this is something that Shweta shared with us, this study about how sometimes in the treatment of dementia, they actually use old photographs. They use different pictures from their childhood or things of the past, and that sort of jogs their memory, and then they're able to recollect. Oh yeah, I was like that, and I remember this person. So in the same way, when Krishna appears, he brings his entire, it's like the greatest show on earth, right? He brings his entourage and he brings all his associates, and he executes all these really fantastic pastimes. And so the idea being that when a living entity who's in a state of forgetfulness hears about or witnesses those pastimes, then it sort of jogs their memory, and they go, oh yeah, I don't really belong here, right? I was part of that. I was
Mm.
part of this show, and and so that reawakens this lost remembrance of one's eternal relationship with the Supreme Lord.
Because that our relationship with the Supreme is eternal, right? It's already there in our, that knowledge is already there in our soul. And all these great souls and saints, they come to just revive that knowledge, bring it back to forefront.
So maybe what we'll do is we'll first we'll do this in the end.
Okay.
Let's take reflections and questions, and then we'll finish off with, we'll sing two beautiful. So this is one we'll watch. This is actually when Krishna appears. Then great demigods, they actually
I
sing
think
this.
we are already very late, so maybe we should show this and then.
Because
it would be-
okay. Okay, whatever. Yeah.
So this is a prayer that happens at the time of Krishna's birth. It's beautiful, and you can watch the whole thing at your leisure. We'll just show some of them.
Sumanam si mudanvitaha.
Krishna appeared in a prison house, so that's why they're showing the prison cell.
Mandam mandam jaladhara jaghajut anusakaram nishite tamabudhute Jayamane Janardhane Devakyam Devarupi.
I wanted to show Delia those dances. She was asking which video they used.
Vishnu Sarva Guha.
The whole universe is dancing in joy at Krishna's appearance, and these heavenly dancers, especially.
Oops.
Umachunayo Devo Sumanam Simutanvita Manda Manda Jaladhara Jagajuran Sagaram Nishititamagurute Jaya Mane Janardane Devakyam Devarupinyam Vishnu Sarva Guhashaya Ishite Namodhute Jayamane Janardane Devakyam Devarupinyam Vishnu Sarva Guhashaya Avirashidyat Prachayam Tisindure Mapushkalaha Devakyam Devarupinyam Vishnu Sarva Guhashaya
It's really beautiful. It's hard to stop it, but I guess we have to. So that is that. So yeah, today is Krishna's appearance, and just so happens that we're right on that section in the Bhagavad Gita. So we got a chance to talk about Krishna and his appearance and why he appears. And even though he says that I appeared so that to reestablish dharma, but in reality he appears to attract our hearts back to him. And it's simply by understanding his appearance, which is very mysterious because most people think of him as this sort of light, effulgent light, right?
Or they think that he's emanating from Brahman. He's just an aspect of Brahman, and he goes back and merges into Brahman. But it's the other way around. Brahman is an effulgence. It's like the light of the bulb doesn't give rise to the bulb, right? It's the other way around. The bulb gives rise to the light.
So this question, Delia and Jidra, you both have the same question. This is technical question. Who's, is Krishna?
Yeah, Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam, they go into great depth to describe this. Krishna, they describe as Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. And he has unlimited expansions, and Vishnu is one of the expansions of Krishna. Although many times people think that Krishna is an avatar of Vishnu, but it's the other way around, as explained in the scriptures.
And when you read Srimad Bhagavatam, then it'll become more clear that there are actually three Vishnus.
Right.
And so most people just think of Vishnu as one. And Vishnu is basically Vishnu is Krishna in office. So, he's more formal, his appearance is formal, his demeanor is formal, and the way you approach him is also very formal. Just like if you went, but the same person, there's a story that Prabhupada actually says that one time there was this man, Gladstone, and he was the prime minister, right? And so there was this man who wanted to go meet him, and he kept the guy outside, the receptionist said, yeah, you just have to wait outside. So he kept waiting and waiting and waiting, and finally got impatient. So he peeped through the keyhole. And then what he saw was that this big prime minister, who everybody looked at with such reverence, was actually playing with his grandson. And he was becoming like a horse, so he went down on his horse, and the grandson was on his back, and he said, move faster, why are you going so slow? And this prime minister was actually trying to, make the grandson happy. So Prabhupada uses this example to show that the same way Krishna, when he's as Vishnu, he's much more like this official person. But when he's Krishna, then you can get on Krishna's shoulders and you can say, you're a cheat. And actually, that was one thing we wanted to sing today. There is a very beautiful song by Bilva Mangal Thakur where he calls Krishna a big thief. And he says that, Krishna, you're a big thief. You have stolen everything that I have. And then he says, now I'm going to imprison you within the prison house of my heart. And I will, and then I will never let you go. So maybe, I don't know if I can just read those.
We can read. Krishna's birth is detailed in Bhagavatam, yes. 10th canto is all about Krishna's appearance in great detail.
So I think it would be nice for all of you to maybe just share some reflections, something that you heard today that was inspiring for you.
Okay, happy Janmashtami, everybody. So I just have to take care of something else.
Thank you. Thank you for joining.
Okay, thank you. Hare Krishna.
Here is the prayer while we wait for your questions and reflection. So it says that.
You can sing the couple of verses.
Really? Okay. That were it's Vrindaashtakam.
Raji prasiddham navanita choram gopangananam chadukula choram aneka janmarjita papa choram choragananyam purusham namami Shiradikaya hridayasya choram navam buddhashamalakanti choram Padashitanam cha samasta choram choragananyam purusham namami.
The translation goes, I offer my respectful obeisances to that foremost of thieves who's famous in Vraja as the butter thief, and he who steals the gopis' clothes, and who, for those who take shelter of him, steals the sins which have accrued over many lifetimes. And then I'll just... O thief, having stolen my wealth, my honor, my senses, my life, and my everything, where can you run to? I have caught you with the rope of my devotion. O stealer of my everything, O thief, today I have imprisoned you in this miserable prison house of my heart, which is very fearful due to the terrible darkness of my ignorance. And there for a very long time you'll remain, receiving appropriate punishment for your crimes of thievery. O Krishna, thief of my everything, the noose of my devotion remaining forever tied, you will continue to reside in the prison house of my heart because I will not release you for millions of eons. So
it's called Chaurashtakam.
It's called Chaurashtakam, which means Chaura means thief. So it's a prayer to a thief. Brahman is the universal consciousness. When one realizes the absolute truth, one starts to see the presence of the super soul in everything. Yes. And so for the practice of bhakti, we want the most intimate experience.
Right.
And that's why, Krishna is the deity of bhakti. He is the bhakti deity, because in that form, one can actually experience the entire, the depth and the breadth of your bhakti. Because with Vishnu, it is a bit formal.
And when we establish relationship with Krishna, then the understanding of Krishna as the effulgence, Brahman effulgence, or the super soul is already included. So one doesn't have to separately strive for that understanding.
Delia, that is actually the most common challenge that universally people have with God. And I'm so glad that you brought that up, because that is indeed, and that is actually precisely the point that, you know, in our mind, person means confinement. It means limited. It means, because that, again, we are projecting our experience of this world onto transcendence. So it's hard for us to conceive that there can be a kind of personhood which is unlimited. So one of the things that is described in the Upanishads is that how he can be unborn, he's the Lord of paradoxes. And that's what makes his personhood very beyond, you know, our conception, that he's unborn and yet he takes birth. He, you know, just by the mere utterance of his name, you know, fear is destroyed. And yet he's fearful when his mother holds a stick in front of him, right? Everything belongs to him, but he still goes around stealing. So he's
everything is within him, but he's also within everything. How do you figure that out?
How do you figure that? He says that. He says, everything is in me, but I'm not in it. So this, you know, so the thing is that these words that we have, they hold a lot of a connotation for us living in the world, right? So one has to break out of that limited sphere of what person means. And
our conception of a personhood is based on the body and the mind, right? Which is limited. But Krishna's personhood is not based on this material body and mind. He's pure spirit. He's pure gold. And then therefore, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, the soul is very hard to understand. What to speak of Krishna? Even an ordinary soul is beyond our imagination. The personhood of an ordinary soul is also beyond our imagination. It's fantastic. The soul is unlimited powers in that sense. So what to speak of the original soul of all the souls? I mean, what kind of person that would be, right? Every soul is amazing, so Krishna is super amazing. That's all.
It's hard to understand. What does it mean? You know, sometimes, you know, even as practicing, you know, devotees, bhaktas, we may say, oh, he has this color, you know, a blackish, bluish, like a monsoon cloud, like a dark rain cloud. What does that mean? You know, and so our words are very limited in being able to describe, you know, what that person is, right?
But well, we see that how in the definition video earlier on, everybody is describing him as the source of all love, and they're mostly describing him as in terms of qualities, right? He's the best friend and he's this and that. So that indicates that we have a hankering for a person, right? His qualities means there must be a person. Qualities cannot come from something impersonal, right? So therefore, the personhood is already there. That's what we are. Because we are a person, we can connect to a person.
Dedre, I really like your point. The point is to lose the attachment of knowing. Yeah. It's also, you know, we want to kind of capture, you know, an understanding and put it in a box, right? But it's described that the more you know Krishna, you know, the more he becomes even more wonderful, right? So it's like you can't really, in one sense, ever know him, you know, completely. But the idea is that the more you know him, the more you, the idea is to fall in love, essentially.
Yeah, not to know.
Yeah. I love the shloka, yada yada hi dharmasya. We've grown up but possibly understood it today. Thank you.
Yeah, it's not like sometimes when people hear that in India, they think that he appears to establish like a particular faith, like Hindu religion, or Krishna is beyond that, because he's coming to establish this eternal dharma for every living entity, not just the Hindus or people born in India.
And of course, you know, Krishna also allows us, and this is the reason why he says, all right, hard for you to figure me out as a person, then I'm also present as Brahman. So we can start there. You know, Krishna says, I'm the taste of water. I am, you know, just
the smell of the earth when the first monsoon comes, right? And the smell of the flowers. Start with that. The light of the sun, the fire of digestion, those things we can relate to. Krishna says, I'm that. You can start with that.
So there are so many ways of relating, but it is also described a very beautiful verse. It says that supreme Brahman, you know, on whom the yogis and the jnanis, they meditate, and they try to just approach him, you know, that supreme Brahman is simply crawling in the courtyard of Maharaj Nanda. So, you know, to me, you know, I'm just really drawn to the idea that it can be so intimate and so so without, because like right now, my husband and I, we've been reading with Nima some Upanishads and Vedanta, like the Vedanta Sutra. We're reading Yoga Sutra, right? So there's also Vedanta Sutra. And when we're reading that, we're always thinking like everything is mentioned like in this sort of indirect way. That one, and then there are these words and we're thinking, oh my goodness, that same person is also this, who's referred to in such a thing.
So this complete knowledge about this different aspects of Godhood and absolute truth and Krishna is beautifully explained in Srimad Bhagavatam. Bhagavad Gita is limited because Krishna doesn't have the time to explain all the details to Arjuna in the middle of a battlefield.
Yeah.
So Bhagavatam is where you will get all this like nectar-filled descriptions of Krishna and his relationship with his devotees, and it's very, very nourishing and inspiring.
And you're right, Delia. You know what Achyuta Bhava says, that when you feel like you don't know, then that's actually progress. And I like what you said, Ritu, that the words represent the intangible. Yeah, it's true. So we'd like to hear from Daryl, Ashley, Eric. If you guys have anything you want to share. Naji, we've had so many conversations. Any thoughts from you? Happy Janmashtami to you.
Thank you. Sorry, I was just unmuting myself. I really like these. How do you pronounce the prayers? The Chaurashtakam? Chaurashtakam. Yeah, I really like those prayers. I can relate to it because you guys were talking earlier about these people who have these experiences of kind of channeling this divine, and I used to have that a little bit in college when I would write essays. But then it's kind of a long story. I can tell you more later, but I feel like the Krishna consciousness kind of stole that from me. I no longer feel like I can have that channeling experience anymore. Or at least I haven't been for some reason. And so I'm a little bit bitter about that.
So you can sing the Chaurashtakam.
Yes, I can sing the Chaurashtakam.
So a different kind of channeling.
Thank you. Happy Janmashtami to all of you. We're so happy and grateful.
And tomorrow